Alright, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. On this video, we're gonna get some new arrows built. Just got a new pack of arrows from Victory Archery in, and I'm at team member Jeremy Lopez's garage, and he is going to teach me / help build some arrows. So let's get these arrows built.
All right guys, we are going to build Alex's arrows for the 2024 hunting season. So first off, when building an arrow, there's so many different ways you can build arrows, right? You can build a heavy arrow, you can build an arrow with high FOC, you can build a super light arrow, you can build an arrow with components on the front end, you can build an arrow with just an insert. There's so many different ways, right? And I think the most important thing is to identify your goal. So is your goal to have a heavy arrow? Is your goal to shoot a fast arrow? Maybe you need a lighter arrow. Maybe you want a bigger broadhead. It all depends on what you're going for, right? So in today's video, we're gonna talk about how to build a precise arrow, how to weigh everything out, and how to actually fletch your arrow, cut your arrow, square your arrow, and all that good stuff. So first off, I wanna ask Alex first, is there something you want in an arrow?
All right, so with my arrows, the past few years, I've been shooting actually a heavier setup. I kind of went to a heavier setup about 2-3 years ago. And this year, I'm gonna kind of shoot actually a lighter arrow, not like super light, but lighter than what I was shooting. So I got the VAP TKOs, and I think I wanna definitely go for a little bit more speed, a little bit more forgiveness, and definitely be focusing on accuracy. And so that's kind of the things that are gonna be important to me, so.
Sweet, yeah, so we can definitely do that. This is a great arrow for those goals. One thing I wanna touch on that Victory offers that not a lot of other arrow companies display is actually when you buy a pack of Victory arrows and you want the lighter set of arrows, right? These arrows are 9.5 GPI, meaning it is 9.5 grains per inch. So in order for it to not be mix matched, Victory actually displays on the back of your pack what each arrow weighs. So each arrow in this pack is 278 grains. So now I know that each arrow in here is 278 grains, which is awesome. I don't have to sit there and weigh out 12 different arrows. I know that in this pack, the variances might be 0.2 to 0.5 grains, but overall, I'm not worried about that in the long run. So, and at the end of this video, stay tuned. We're gonna talk about a little tip that I learned from a buddy who learned from Levi Morgan on how to build practice arrows and hunting arrows. So that way you don't have to practice with your precise hunting arrows. All right, so we're gonna open up these bad boys. If I can get them open. So in today's video, for time purposes, we're gonna build 3 arrows. All right, so what I like to do first is I like to write down Alex's arrow build. I like to notate everything so that way when we come back to these or we need to build more arrows, we can just refer to my notes and not have to try and remember how we built this. So right here, Alex's 2024 hunting arrow. All right, we got a Victory VAP TKO and a 350 spine. So for this purpose, we're gonna go with 50 grain outserts. So how this works, it's a half out. It slides over the front of your arrow. That way it's protecting the shaft, but it also has structural integrity going inside of the arrow. And these weigh 50 grains. They are aluminum. Plenty strong, never had a problem with aluminum inserts other than maybe if you hit rebar. You might break one, but you're gonna break anything if you hit rebar. So first off, what we need to do is we need to get a length on Alex's arrows. So we're gonna cut them to a specific length based on Alex's draw length. What you can do for this is you can put it in a draw board. However, I don't have a draw board in my garage, so what I do is we're gonna pull back his bow, he's gonna come to full draw, and I'm gonna mark at where we're gonna make the cut. Yep. All right guys, he's gonna draw back. He's gonna keep his thumb off the trigger, and I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna mark right there. So there's our starting point. You can let down. Perfect. So now we'll take this and we're gonna get our first cut. And you gotta remember too, you have a half out going over the shaft, so you might have to make your cuts a little different. This isn't exactly gonna be the end of his arrow necessarily. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make our first cut that we just measured here. So whenever you make a cut, make sure you do it the same exact way every time. I like to take the knockout, so that way I know from carbon to carbon is that total length. So I'm gonna put it in the saw here and I'm gonna measure. So I need to go a little bit farther.
Oh, I didn't feel like this last time. It's so much more.
Guys, this is the mod saw. We got one of these sent from a mod saw. It's a pretty sweet saw. It has everything you need. It has an arrow spinner, it has an arrow square, it has a little indicator where you can see any sort of wobble. It's all super compact, and for the price, I don't think you can really beat it. It's an awesome garage saw, that's for sure. I use it all the time. All right, so first here we're gonna make our cut. I need power. All right, there's our first cut. So what I want to do next is I want to weigh everything out and make sure that we are good. Everything says what it actually is. So I'm going to weigh this outsert at 50, right on the nuts. Perfect. So next I'm going to weigh the arrow, 235. Cool. So now we're gonna have Alex pull back again. I'm gonna put in the insert and we're just gonna confirm that that is exactly where I want it until we have to take any more length off, and then we can start actually building the arrow. All right, so now Alex is gonna pull back. We're gonna confirm the length. We do have a broadhead in there. So you can see Alex doesn't want the broadhead to go possibly cut his hand. That way we left a little bit hanging off. His actual outsert's just over the edge of the riser, so that's a great length. We're gonna keep it there. Now we're gonna move on in the arrow building process. So you can let down. Perfect. All right, so next is we're gonna finish the cuts on the rest of the arrows. Pretty quiet saw too. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but it's super quiet. All right, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna score, square, and clean Alex's arrows. So what we wanna do, and you can do it as, there's totally tons of different ways you can do this, but what I like to do, I like to take a silver Sharpie here and just outline the edges. That way I know when I square these, that silver should be gone. Super important to square the front of your arrows because there could be some variances and it could cause you to have a little bit of wobble. So first off, we're gonna square these on the mod saw. All you do is stick them in here and you just spin, keeping pressure on that. A little bit more. All right, you can see all the Sharpies gone. That one's good. Go to the next one. And I like to do these all at once. I don't like to get ahead of myself, so I do every single step with all the arrows, right? That's done. And a little more on that one. Awesome. If you don't have this, you can also grab these little tiny ones. These are pretty awesome for micro diameter arrows. All it is kind of like a little tip there that goes inside your arrow. And you just put it on a flat surface and spin it. These come with some outserts. I think Easton makes one. Otherwise, you can probably get them at any pro shop. But essentially it does the same thing. All right, so once that's done, I'm gonna score these arrows. And what scoring is it's just grabbing the actual inside of the carbon so that glue has something to grab onto. It's scuffing it up. So what I'm gonna do is go up and down a couple times, really score that arrow. That's done. All right, next off is we're gonna clean the inside and get all that carbon out of there, right? So I'm gonna do is pour a little acetone in here. Get that out of the way so I don't spill it. Okay, a couple Q-tips. Dip it in some acetone. All you're gonna do is put your Q-tip in here. Spin it around, really grab that dust and carbon out of there. Look how dirty that is. Take the clean end, get there, let that dry out a little bit. Perfect. Last one. You might be thinking, why aren't I using these? Well, they don't really fit in these shafts, so I use Q-tips. But on like a 204 arrow or a 5 mil, you can definitely use those. All right, we're all done there. So now we have cut arrows. Keep those out of the way. Turn that off. Put the nocks back in. All right, so now we have a finished product. Now we can start weighing out components and gluing. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weigh each one of these arrows and see if there's any variation. Make sure your arrow's completely on the scale. So the first one we have 242.6. Second one, 242.4. And the third one we got 242.4. So we got a 0.2 difference in these shafts. It's pretty incredible. Next we're gonna weigh our components, make sure they're 50 grains. 50. $49.8 and 50. So since these two are 50 and there's a 0.2 difference, it's not huge, but if you do get components that maybe weigh a little less or a little more, what you want to do is take your lightest component and put it on your heaviest arrow so it kind of offsets that grains. That way you can get your arrow really precise and you can get matched up for that certain grain you're hitting. In this case, Victory's components and arrows are really precise, so we're not gonna really worry about that. What I'll do is I'll take the lightest one and put it in the heaviest one. That way we can get as close as possible, and then we'll keep the 50s in the lightest arrow. So put those in there, and we'll put these in here. So next is we're gonna take our field points. Before we do any gluing, I like to put these in here. These are 100 grain field points. Alex will be shooting 100 grain broadheads. So that's what we're gonna do. So now what I'm gonna do before I fletch is I'm just gonna get an idea if there's any wobble in these arrows. So that one is good the way it sits. And you can see on the mod saw, there's a little indicator right here. And all I gotta do is watch that. If I have any sort of wobble over that, I'll know right away. That one's good. And that one's good. So going through Alex's 24 arrows, going through 24, we might find a couple duds. What we can either do is we'll mark them on fletching, and Alex will just use those for practice and he won't use those to hunt with, or we can just scrap them. It's up to you on what you want to do. But out of these 3 arrows, they spin really good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to fletch these, because when you before I actually put glue in, I just wanted to kind of get an idea if there was going to be any wobble on the front or back end. But before you actually put glue in, I like to spin my arrow with fletchings on the back, because essentially you're going to be shooting your arrow with fletchings on the back, right? So you want to see what it does. So what we're going to do is Alex is going to be shooting a 3 fletch in a AAE hybrid 26 vein. So we're going to take these and these, and we're going to do the same exact thing we just did. Now you don't have to do this. You can get pretty close, but since we're building precise arrows, we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna basically take this and put all these group of 3 veins on my scale to make sure we're not like super far off. 8.3. 8.3, 8.3, pretty solid. Ooh, 8, 8.2, 8.2. So that one's an 8. 8.5, oh, 8.2. Okay, so we'll keep those together. And this might be a little overboard. You don't have to do this, like I said, but you get a good idea. All right, so we're all within 0.2 grains of each other, so we're not gonna worry a ton about that. So now we're gonna fletch. So, next step when fletching arrows, you gotta decide, do you want a right helical, or do you want a left helical, or an offset, or do you want straight? For this purpose, Alex is gonna shoot a left because his Hoyt spits his arrow out of his bow to the left. This isn't a huge deal, but I've always done it. It's just an extra step you probably don't have to do, but since we're doing it, we're gonna do it. So we're gonna use a primer pen and we're gonna use some glue. Now I'm sure somebody will say you can't use tack glue with AE veins. Well, let me tell you, Sure can. You don't need a primer pen with these AE hybrid vanes. I always use them just to be sure. So basically I'm gonna do that there. Let it dry a little bit. Then I'm just gonna make sure that this vane actually lines up on the arrow, which it does. So when you're fletching arrows, you just wanna really make sure there's no gap here on your shaft. If there's any sort of gap, you're gonna get airflow and that glue's not gonna wanna stick to your shaft. So we're good there. When I'm fletching arrows and applying glue, I'm a bead guy. I like to just give a little line of beads all the way down. Kind of fill in the gap there. And we're just gonna apply pressure. Let it sit. All right, so next, what we're gonna do is finish up this arrow. So now we are completely fletched, and now we're gonna glue in the insert. So we have this insert here. We're gonna repeat that process I just did. I'm gonna come over here, and I'm gonna watch this for any sort of wobbling. So I like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark this. Be sure not to spin the component, but I'm gonna mark on the actual component here and then on the shaft. Why is that important? Well, I know that's spun really good because if I twist this at all, it might spin differently. So when I glue this in, all I'm gonna do cows. All right, guys, so now we got our glue applied. This is just blue glue from G5. And then all I'm gonna do is put this in here. I'm simply gonna spin it on so it gets in all those grooves. I'm good to go there. I'm gonna take this and just wipe this glue off. Or you can use a paper towel. Up to you. Whatever you want to do. And let that sit for a little bit, and then I'm going to repeat the process. All right, guys, so this is Alex's 2024 hunting arrow. Now I just need to build like 24 more of these, and he'll have 24 arrows ready to go. So lastly, I'm gonna get a final weight on his arrow. So his finished weight's about 420. So Alex shoots about 65 to 70 pounds. This is an awesome weight. He'll probably be within that 280 to 290 range. Awesome speed. It's a good forgiveness speed. That way when he's shooting at 20 and 30 yards at deer, if he misjudges or has to judge a whitetail on the run, and he makes an error, he's not gonna have a giant miss if he were to shoot a heavier arrow. So here we go, 420, right on the nuts. We're gonna get a final spin here. Glorious. So there we go. And last tip here, if you wanna have 6 to 9 hunting arrows, and 6 to 9 practice arrows. What you can do, so if Alex wants to do this, we can do it, but what I do with my arrows is I put in a glue-in field tip. And you might ask how you get it the same. Well, it depends on what your front weight of your components are. So for instance, Alex is 50 grains plus 100 grains, which equals 150 grains out front. So what all he has to do is, instead of gluing in his actual component, he'll just get a glue-in tip. So all Alex has to do is get a glue-in tip. So this is 120 glue-in tip, and this is 30 extra grains. So what I'll do is I'll take this 30 and put it on this 120. All it is, you screw it on there, put a little string wax in there so it doesn't come off, apply some hot melt on the sides, stick it into your shaft, and now I have 150 grains up front. My arrow is really well protected. I don't have to jack up my components if I'm shooting into a bag target. If I hit rebar, anything when I'm shooting 3D, I'm shooting these glue-in tips. It's not a big deal. I don't have to jack up my hunting arrow. And if I lose these, I know I got 12 more hunting arrows ready to go. And if I need to build more, so be it. But this is a super awesome way to just use these for practice. They come in and out, so if you switch arrows, you can just heat up your shaft and pull them right out. You don't have to worry about actually dinking around with components. So I've been shooting these for years. You might have to leave your arrow slightly shorter because you cut your arrow a little longer for this component. I can tell you that they're not gonna tune any differently if you have maybe a ½ inch longer of an arrow. I've shot them through paper before. It tunes the exact same. And what I really want is I want my hunting arrow the best to the ability to be tuned. I don't care if my 3D arrow can't shoot a broadhead out to 100 yards. I care about my hunting arrow. So if you're concerned about that, shoot it through paper, check it. If you have a slight tear, it's not a big deal. But yeah, that's a tip that I learned from a buddy who learned that from Levi Morgan. So if you're not a huge field tip guy, look into glue-in points. They really will. All right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. That's how you build a precise hunting arrow. Make sure you get a good weight on all your components you're putting on. Mismatch the light and the heavy ones to make that precise, even grain arrow. You want to be within like 1 grain to 3 grains of all your arrows. If you don't want to do all those, throw your components on, build out your arrow, and then maybe weigh out your broadheads or your field points, whatever you're using. Mix and match your actual heads so that you can be within that 1 to 3 grains. I mean, even 5 grains, depending on how far you're shooting, you're not going to notice a huge difference by any means. So if you guys like the video, like and subscribe. Check out our podcast. We got some awesome guests lined up. Be sure to check that out and be on the lookout for more archery content and Whitetail DNA content rolling into the summer.